This episode is brought to you by Amazon Business. How can you free up your team from time-consuming office tasks? Amazon Business empowers leaders to not only streamline purchasing, but better support their teams so they can focus on strategy and growth. Free up your teams and focus on your future. Learn more about the technology, insights, and support available at amazonbusiness.com.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and me, Kevin Day. It's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire is stuck somewhere. The Baroness gave him a couple of days off, I think by taking his laptop away from him, and he went, so he'll be back, don't worry, we know where he is. He just couldn't get back in time for this interview, which is an interview with Mick Buckley, who is the chair of the board at AFC Wimbledon, a club I know very well, as you'll discover in the interview. And this is what Mick had to say to my questions and to some questions that I got from some mates who have been Wimbledon fans for such a long time. Mick, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I can only apologise that Kieran's not with us, but it does mean that maybe we can talk a bit more broadly about football without getting too bogged down in the financial detail, which of course we will do so. It's a brilliant story, what's happening at AFC Wimbledon. But first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself before you became chair of the board at Wimbledon, how you became to be a Wimbledon fan, what sort of work you were doing, and then we'll get straight back in to your work at the club.
Yeah, well, good morning, Kevin, and it's great to be here. And yeah, talking about football is always fun. So yeah, so just in terms of my involvement, I'm one of literally hundreds of people involved in the creation and the growth of AFC Wimbledon over the last 23 years. I've been chairing the club for the last 3.5 years. And have played a variety of different roles since our inception back in 2002. I started supporting Wimbledon as a 12-year-old back in the mid-70s. Had an interesting encounter with my PE teacher one day who said, I've got some bad news, I've got some good news. The bad news was he was dropping me from the school team. The good news, he was giving me a free season ticket to Wimbledon Football Club. So Wimbledon had the foresight to actually go and try and attract younger spectators by giving season tickets away at school, which was looking back was a really smart thing to do. So literally the next evening, I was walking over Hayden's Road Bridge, seeing these amazing floodlights, and was absolutely captivated by watching Wimbledon beat Grantham Town 3-2. I was hooked. As you know, there wasn't very much to do in 1974. And Plough Lane quickly became a bit of a haven for me and my mates. We went to all the games. Just as it is these days, Plough Lane was a very welcoming place. So we also attended training sessions. We'd help collect the balls. If a ball went over the stand, which it very often did, if Dave Bassett was attempting a crossfield pass, we would be dispatched to retrieve the ball. So it was a lot of fun. And, my heroes in those days were Dickie Guy, our goalkeeper, Ian Cook, our captain, Dave Bassett. All those guys are still very involved with AFC Wimbledon. So it's staggering to kind of have lunch every couple of weeks with my childhood heroes. They were all amazing people. I think things were probably helped by the fact that, as you know, Wimbledon won the Southern League 3 years in a row and went on this amazing journey into the Football League. It wasn't straightforward. We went from 4-3 to 4-3 to 4-3, but then people forget that. We made our way up to the first division. We spent 14 years in the top tier. It became the Premier League along the way. We had that amazing day at Wembley when we won the FA Cup. We beat Liverpool. And it was just an amazing story. I mean, everybody wants to do a Wimbledon, and we'll probably talk about that. The financial structure doesn't enable that anymore, really. But, there wasn't an awful lot of money fueling that rise through the leagues. And it was just the joy that kept giving. It didn't have a happy ending, as you know, but that's what I experienced. And, when I had my kids, I took them at Selhurst Park. Didn't enjoy that as much, to be absolutely honest with you. Sorry, with no disrespect to our beloved neighbours. I remember one Friday night, there were probably a few thousand people in the ground, a 0-0 draw with Sheffield United, and I had my head was in my hands, just thinking, if only we could get back to Plough Lane. And, we were in the Championship then, but I used to think, if only we could get back to Plough Lane, just play in the 4th division, it would be better than this. And obviously, in a way we didn't really expect, we've ended up there.
I've heard the floodlights at Plough Lane described as many things, but amazing. I've not heard them described as, I have to say, back in the day. Has Dickie Guy still got the beard?
Dickie Guy still has a beard. He's still an immense figure. He's actually the president of AFC Wimbledon. Pretty much has been since we reformed in 2002. To some of your listeners who don't know who he is, I mean, he basically became a national figure by saving a penalty at Ellen Road during an amazing FA Cup run. Prior to that, Wimbledon became the first non-league team since the war to win on a first division ground when we beat Burnley. You probably remember. That game wasn't televised, but apparently Dickie had the most amazing game that day as well. So he's a giant of a man, and we love him to bits.
I was at the replay of the Leeds game. It was at Selhurst Park. I mean, it's about 49,000 people. I remember it, and you were an amazing symbol for South London at the time, and until you became successful, and then we all turned on you.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. I suppose it was. There really wasn't very much money spent on Wimbledon, so the style of play we adopted, which really was ahead of its time in many ways, didn't necessarily elicit a lot of critical acclaim, if you like. But much of what was done in those years, in things like video analysis and preparation, was done at Wimbledon before other clubs. So it wasn't just about brute and brawn. There was a real method, technical preparation to it, which was ahead of its time.
Mick, tell us a little bit about your reappointment as chair of the club board, because I understand it was a very thorough process.
Yes, I mean, just going back a little bit before that, my background is in. You asked me earlier on actually about my work. My background was in the media industry, so I worked for broadcast networks. I used to lead newsrooms, and when AFC Wimbledon started, I was very, very busy, but I had skills that I could bring to the club from time to time. So particularly in the sort of in the media communication space. So I was involved with the club from the beginning. When I stopped doing that, the Dons Trust asked me if I would become a non-exec director at AFC Wimbledon. So I've been doing that for 12 years. And then 3 years ago, I was asked if I would become chairman. At that point in time, we were going through a bit of a rough patch. We were probably heading for relegation. And it was felt that the sort of skills and experience I had would be helpful in holding things together and rebuilding, if you like, which is what we've been doing. So I've done the job as chair for most of the time. I've been doing it on a continually extended interim basis. And it was decided by all of us, actually, that we should have a process around that and see who else would like to do it. And it either turned out that I was the best qualified person, or nobody wanted to work quite so many hours for zero payment. But I was duly the lucky guy that won the contest, so was reappointed.
I read the report. One of the very good things about Wimbledon, which Kieran thoroughly approves of, is the openness of your communication with fans and the media. And the report of your reappointment said that every single candidate agreed that we need to continue to review our leadership structure as we grow in size and complexity. Can you put a little bit of meat on those bones for us?
Yeah, I think so. So if you can sort of think about when we started with a 9-person elected board of very, very busy people. Our location in southwest London, does give us access to some sort of fairly highly qualified people. They don't necessarily have that much time, but they have a lot of experience and wisdom to impart. In the early years of the club was quite small, really. It was a small non-league club playing in a non-league stadium. And obviously with the development of Plough Lane, so Plough Lane, when it's finished, will be a 20,000-seater stadium. The club owns the freehold. The club has 150 employees now. It really has massively grown in size since the Kings Meadow days. So obviously you need to evolve your ownership and your leadership structures as the size of the business gets bigger. So I think about 5 years ago, we had an external review of our governance, and it was identified that, just having these 9 elected people wasn't really enough, that we needed to actually have an operating board as well. So at that point in time, we set up what we then called the PLC board. It's now called the club board, and that's made up of 3 people from a Dons Trust board. It's made up of 2 people representing minority investors. So the Dons Trust currently owns 80% of the shares. There is a 10% shareholder, and then the other 10% of the shares are owned by lots and lots of people. So they are represented by 2 people on the board. And then there are 3 non-exec directors who bring expertise in things like legal, HR, safeguarding, and communications. So that board meets once a month, and it's the board that the executive team report to. I think every organisation has an evolving structure. Nothing is ever set in stone, but it's evolving and working quite well at the moment.
But that professional leadership structure doesn't compromise the general fan-owned feel of the club, does it?
No, not really. I mean, at least half the people on that board are Wimbledon fans, probably more than that. 3 of the members of that board are Dons Trust board members. And if they all agree on something and everybody else disagrees, they will hold sway.
Oh, okay.
So they have the right of veto. The Dons Trust board approves the strategy, approves the budget. there are a number of areas that the club board can't really get into without the prior approval of the Dons Trust Board. So, as I say, it's kind of evolving, but it seems to work quite well at the moment. And the two boards work quite well together in their respective areas. The Dons Trust Board has to run a membership organisation. So there are now 7,000 members. And we want to grow that. We want more and more people to get involved in what we're doing. So they have quite a lot of work to do just running a membership organisation, as well as overseeing the activities of the club board and the club.
Mick, I didn't realise that Plough Lane wasn't finished and that you still had room to expand, because those away fans who have been there, or those of us who live not too far away, will realise it's a fairly cramped site. So I didn't realise you had potential to grow even further.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece of land. So basically, we have one permanent stand at Plough Lane, and then we have 3 semi-permanent structures. And they can all be pushed back on a temporary basis to add more seats, or they can just be replaced by a permanent building. So now look, we are still paying for the first phase of a development of Plough Lane, so it's some way away. I think the next thing that could happen is to add more seats to the semi-permanent structures. We were sold out quite a bit last season. Obviously, League One clubs are going to bring more fans as well. So, so we're not inhibited by what we've got. We have got the ability as a club to double our capacity. So there's lots of potential there for us to grow.
Mick, as you know, we are a football finance pod, even when Kieran's not here. So I need to retain some Kieran brownie points by asking a couple of specific football finance questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One of them's slightly older, but in March, and again, this comes back to your openness with the fans. In March, you reported that you've lost money every year since 2018 before selling players, but after selling players, you were always profitable. And I think something like 35% of the entire transfer income into League Two last year was down to you. But it's clearly not sustainable to base future profit on player sales, is it? So how do you resolve that situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key question. So, yeah, we have underlying losses of $1 million to $1.5 million every year. And we've mitigated those, I think for the last 5 years by selling players. A key part of our strategy has been for a long time to be a development club. So we do spend a lot of time and effort on our academy. I think through our ability to sell players, it may well be that and Kevin's not here, so maybe we shouldn't talk about things like EBITDA, which neither of us are experts on. But I think in EBITDA terms, we were the only club in the Football League to be profitable 3 years running. And as you say, we've taken a huge proportion of transfer income into League Two and League One, actually, way beyond what we should. But you're quite right. As much as you can aspire to do that every season, and the other fan-owned club, Exeter City, have done the same thing. You can't go into a year basing your ability to break even on that. So it is the really smart question to ask about the finances of AFC Wimbledon. And what we need to do as a club is find a way to close that gap so that when we do sell a player, that's extra money. That's not the money we need just to break even.
Mm-hmm. I've got a sort of bad news, good news question thing here. I was at Plough Lane the day before this happened. I did a massive charity walk around every ground in London, and the welcome from Wimbledon couldn't have been nicer, except the day after you had that terrible flood, which I'm still slightly concerned is my fault, because the groundsman painted a smile on his face, but he didn't look particularly happy when me and the Womble walked out into the middle of the pitch. But how much did that affect your finances? Because it was a horrible thing to happen. I mean, half the ground slipped away essentially, didn't it?
Yeah. Well, we were insured is the short answer. It affected us in many ways. I mean, firstly, the football bit, which is always the most important, we were doing really well up until that point. And we were about to play Newcastle at home in the League Cup. That game got switched to Newcastle, and we narrowly lost. So who knows what might have happened if we played that game at Plough Lane. And we did lose a bit of momentum on the playing side after the flood, because we had a lot of games to kind of play in a short period of time to catch up. So that was the first thing. The second reflection on it is that, yet again, not just Wimbledon fans, but the football world kind of stepped up to help us. So one of our fans, great guy called Graham Stacey, launched a fundraising campaign. It wasn't launched by the club. It, again, just one of our fans taking from the club and just being proactive. Many people in the football world supported that, for which we are really, really grateful. Not least Newcastle, actually, who made a really sizable donation to it as well.
Yeah.
So that was really helpful. But obviously, it didn't pay for the increased insurance premium for next season, or the excess on the insurance. One of the things we had just done literally weeks before was we took the decision to pay quite a bit more for our insurance for a lower excess, if you like. So not all the decisions we've taken at Wimbledon have been the right decisions, but that really was a great decision. And I give our financial controller great credit for recommending that to the board. So the financial hit really was around the increased premium moving forward and the excess, which really wasn't very much. So by the time we'd been to Newcastle and taken a gate share on a much bigger crowd, we'd pretty much broken even on the flood. So, but again, the other thing about the flood was we're a fan-owned club, and immediately the fans step up. So no, we didn't have to put an announcement out where there were people there ready to work on the pitch within minutes of it going public. The fans just come together and they want to make a difference every time, which is just amazing.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout, the one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
You know that feeling when someone shows up for you just when you need it most? That's what Uber is all about. Not just a ride or dinner at your door. It's how Uber helps you show up for the moments that matter. Because showing up can turn a tough day around, or make a good one even better. Whatever it is, big or small, Uber is on the way, so you can be on yours. Uber, on our way.
This is one of those things, that insurance decision you said you made just weeks before the flood. It's a shame Kieran's not here to discuss that, because he's always said that clubs at League One, League Two level, when they're looking to make savings, it's quite often in insurance premiums that they make those savings, which is a risky thing to do. And if you had done that, you'd have been in serious trouble. So it just goes to show that insurance should be perhaps more of a priority than it is for some lower league clubs.
I think so. I mean, as you would imagine, we didn't think for 1 minute that weeks later,
of course,
you know, our football pitch was going to become a golf course. So, and there was also quite a lot of, flooding in the ground floor of the stadium. So our museum, for example, was flooded, the club shop. But again, you know, we have this amazing historical society, Wimbledon in Sporting History. They appeared from nowhere and removed all of the memorabilia to a safe place. And they've actually used the flood as an opportunity because they have now expanded and reinvented the museum. And it's one of the best football museums in the country. It's absolutely, I don't know if you've been in there, Kev, but it's really good.
I have been in there, Mick, and I'm still slightly grumpy that the first time I went to Plough Lane and saw the museum, your trophy cabinet is huge. It's much bigger than ours because, of course, back in the day, you were so successful as a Southern League club that you won so much. It's very. I've got a more frivolous question to ask you about the playoff later on. But in the meantime, I mean, what a wonderful day you had. How much did that net you? How much did going up through the playoffs give you? And how much will League One make you next season?
So, and there's a related point I would make, which is, you know, the clubs that automatically get promoted don't seem to share too much in the bounty of the playoffs.
Yeah,
which I find quite strange, actually. But so the semi-final and the final made us in excess of 200,000, but then there were lots of bonuses to pay. So, you know, we reward our employees for success, partially because as a fan-owned club, we can't pay at the top of the market. So, you know, we pay people quite conservatively, but we do reward for success. So, you know, there won't be much of that kind of playoff bounty left, if you like. In terms of League One, so we had a fantastic party the night of the playoff final. We had considered, I was asked so many times in the second half of the season, are you sure you really want to get promoted? You know, is the team really trying to get promoted? The team looked at times like they weren't trying to get promoted, but actually they really were. And we're football fans. Yeah, we're football fans that own a football club. Of course, we want to get promoted. I mean, it's what you do and part of your DNA. But the reality is, it's a very different League One to the one we left 3 years ago. So, you know, we would to stay. I think when we were last in League One, we were probably 20th in the kind of player salary league table, if you like, the SCMP data that comes through.
Yeah.
You know, if we're going to be 20th, based on what was spent the season that's just gone, if we're going to be 20th next year, we're going to have to spend another £1 million on player salaries, so that will absorb pretty much all of the increase in central funding. So when you say how much you're going to make being in League One, the answer is on an underlying basis, we're still going to lose the same amount of money. So I find it really, really interesting the way that the owners of the clubs have voted for their own regulations. So in League Two, we had just voted for SCMP, salary cost management protocol, without getting too technical, that we would spend 50% of our revenue on players and a manager. And if as owners we injected equity into the club, so in other words, put money in to buy shares, only half that money could go on player salaries. So I might be getting a bit technical here, so forgive me. In League One, they voted for 60% of their revenue to be spent on players and a much greater percentage of equity injections to be spent on players. So basically, if you look at the reports of League One clubs, financial reports, on average, they're pretty much spending all their turnover on player salaries before they address all their other costs. So I think when we were planning our stadium, the average League One club was losing £1.5 million. It's more like £5 million a year. So as a fan-owned club, we're going into a league looking to break even, competing against clubs who on average will be losing £5 million a year. It's really, really tough challenge.
Mm. You can be as technical as you like, Mick. Our listeners love technical financial data. It's only me that panics a little bit. But I've learned enough from Kieran to follow what you were saying, and it's incredible that even in the short time you've been away from League One, the challenge has already become much more difficult. And I presume then that when you've got clubs the size of Luton that are coming down with parachute payments, that makes it even harder, does it?
Yeah. Well, we get on really well with Luton. They're great people, and it seems to me that a lot of their bounty, if you like, has gone into building or will go into building a new stadium. So yes, I mean, parachute payments is another subject we can discuss, but I think sort of just being realistic. I mean, wealthy people don't get wealthy giving their money away. And I sense that the owners of League One clubs are recognising what they're participating in and do want to lose less money. So, one simple thing that as owners of League One clubs we can do is align ourselves with the League Two SCMP, and that would reduce reduce the losses immediately. My personal view is that League One and League Two should both go to 40% of their revenue on the SCMP, assuming that people like the PFA would find that palatable. But what that would give us is much more long-term sustainability. At the moment, it's a bit of a race to the bottom, and it just doesn't work. And if clubs were able to be businesses, sustainable businesses, and to break even, they would then become more valuable. So, really getting into kind of financial lingo, but if you look at the value of MSL clubs, for example, or the value of clubs in other leagues, it's much greater because they have a salary cap, which I don't think we'll be able to achieve here. But they are able to have the ability to break even and to be more valuable. So I think it's in everybody's interest to do that.
Why do you not think we'll be able to achieve a salary cap here?
I think we tried to achieve a salary cap during the pandemic, and there was pushback from the PFA. And I think they would now recognise that it's not sustainable for their members to be employed by a series of businesses who are all losing so much money. There's no long-term sustainability for their members either in that scenario. So I think it was tried and there was pushback, but I think those conversations should continue, quite frankly.
Hmm. Mick, I didn't want to ask you the obvious question, the question that all fan-owned clubs get asked, which is the limit of ambition for a fan-owned club. So I thought what I would do is ask some friends of mine who are fans for some other questions. Unfortunately, most of those questions were about the limits of the ambition of a fan-owned club, but I want to put them to you anyway. Who would have thought that Hayden's Road would get mentioned twice on the same podcast? So I'm a good South London boy. My Aunt Joan and Uncle Bill lived on Hayden's Road, just down a few hundred yards from Plough Lane. Obviously, I went to school with Wimbledon fans, one of whom, Dominic, was outside Lytham St Anne's, the Football League headquarters, back in 1977 to get the good news. A couple of the others, Mark, well-known comedian, Paul, showbiz type. So I asked them... I want to ask, it won't surprise you that this first question, however, comes from one of the showbiz types. who wanted to know that after the playoff final whistle went, did you cry, did you sing, or just reach for the nearest bottle of champagne?
All three of those things, actually.
Good. This next question, you've answered this in a way, but I want to put it to you because it's got more detail in it. And this question is that if the average League One wage is $8,400 a week, and it seems that the maximum you pay is around $3,000 a week, then how can you compete and attract players to you, especially when the cost of living is so high in London?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I suppose that in any business, you will always find the talent that finds the wages you pay acceptable. So one thing about next season, which gives me real confidence, is although we have lost 2 or 3 key players, at this point in time, we have kept the core of our team together. And we were a very difficult team to score against and a very difficult team to beat in League Two. And I'm hoping that with the sort of the togetherness and the resilience that we have as a club, the group of players we've got, we will add to that with the best we can afford in the market. And there will be players we can afford. There always are. And that should give us enough to be competitive in League One.
You can tell these questions come from real football fans because they're tinged with pessimism, obviously. I mean, and obviously, we all want it to be competitive in League One. But as one of my friends points out, in the last 6 years, 4 playoff winners have gone straight back down and 2 went down the year after. So are you destined to be a League Two budget club with the odd League One cameo, or is there a long-term plan to sustainably stay up and then perhaps even push forward from there? Because as you say, getting back to the Championship at Plough Lane would really complete a circle, wouldn't it?
So I'll start with the last bit of what you just said, which is when the ridiculous decision was made to allow Wimbledon Football Club to move to Milton Keynes. We were in the Championship. We weren't playing with respect to our friends at Palace where we wanted to be playing. So we fixed that bit, and it would be just the most amazing thing for all of us working together to put Wimbledon back in the Championship, playing at Plough Lane. So we would really like to achieve that, but there are limitations. I was about to tell you actually that the last 6 playoff winners have been back in League Two within 2 years, and that's something that we find very motivating to try and change. The last time we went to League One, we managed to stay there somehow for 6 years, which is very useful in terms of building the stadium. So I think the limitations to our ability to stay and progress in League One, some of them are structural. So as we just discussed, we do need League One owners to decide they want to lose less money. It may take a couple of years for that to kind of come through, but if it does, then that immediately puts us in relatively a better position. I think the other thing which is on the horizon is the incoming football regulator. So I think, it is likely that there will be a more equitable distribution of revenues when the football regulator comes in. We are hopeful that clubs which have the right values and are trying to work sustainably will see some benefits from the football regulator. We're not exactly sure what those are at the moment, but we think that's quite likely. So again, I think that's a couple of years. So we've always been pretty good at Wimbledon at just getting to the next bend in the river, if you like, having a look around it and figuring out how we're going to survive and thrive in the next phase, if you like. So I think the big challenge for this club at the moment is to think about the next 2 years and how we fight like we always do not to get relegated and to stay in League One. It's going to be very challenging, but and typical Wimbledon, the club wasn't quick enough to ask fans for money. So fans have been softly protesting that we should be asking them to put more money in. So we now are saying to those of our fans that can, if you can donate a bit of money, there are lots of different ways you can give money to AFC Wimbledon. You can donate into the We Are Wimbledon Fund. You can enter the Don's Draw. There are a lot. You can buy a brick with your name on. There are so many things you can do and ways of giving the club money. So we need to close £1 million gap. That's the challenge we're currently working on. And it's typically led by the fans who've been sort of campaigning before the club has kind of been putting that message out there. But that's something which is starting to kind of gain traction and we're working on. So I think if we can, if in the next couple of years, if we can close that gap, we all recognise it's a privilege to own a football club. The responsibility that goes with it is to ensure we have enough resources to compete, and that's what we're trying to do. So I think some of it is structural, if those things can change, and some of it is up to us as owners to really work together and make stuff happen. The other bit about the championship is clearly the parachute payments. You know, it is unlikely that Wimbledon will compete in the championship whilst the current level of parachute payments are in existence. So from our point of view, the first and second division existed together, I think, for 114 years before the introduction of parachute payments. And during the professional phase of those 114 years, you simply had relegation clauses in player contracts. So if we go down to the championship, you will earn 2/3 less money. And for some reason, I think back in 2006, the Premier League decided, you know, they needed to have a bit of a bounty when they went down. So that is the single biggest barrier to us fulfilling our dream of putting Wimbledon back in the championship as a fan-owned club.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at Polestar.com.
I'm interested, Mick, in what you talked about fans making donations there, because I was going to ask you this later, because you said immediately after promotion that fans have asked how they could help financially and there would be an opportunity for them to do so. But I assume that you were talking about fairly high-end donations, but here you're saying that a simple thing like buying a brick or buying a ticket every week is as helpful as somebody offering you 10, 15, 20,000.
Yeah, so we've had some people come forward with. So I think we've always taken the approach: you give what you can, and for some people, they don't have any money, but they give time as volunteers. We have hundreds of volunteers. Other people can give a bit, and we are obviously in Southwest London, so there are some people that can give a lot more. So we've had some donations of 20,000 from some of our wealthier fans just to get things moving. That we've had a donation of 50,000, and then we have a number of fans just kind of putting in what they can. So it's always the way it's worked. people have always given what they can, and that's all you can do, really, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, I think, Mick, for the benefit of some of our overseas listeners, some of our listeners around the country, and indeed some of our listeners north of the river, we should point out there's a world of difference between the Wimbledon around Plough Lane and the Wimbledon around the tennis ground up the road. I mean, you're a proper South London club rather than a South West London club, I would say. And of course, there are wealthy, high net individuals around there, but it's also an area that's struggling in a lot of parts, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So Merton, we're in the London borough of Merton, which is an interesting borough because there's the west of the borough, which is very salubrious and quite well known. And there's the east of the borough, which is really quite poor by comparison. So a lot of the work our foundation does is to help the east side of the borough. So, for example, we charge for footballing sessions in the west side of the borough, and then we put football sessions on for nothing in the east side of the borough, for example. You know, so it is a real South London community where there are lots of pockets of need, which, you know, we as a community club have a responsibility to help.
A couple more questions from my friends, your fans, and then I'll let you go. I mean, the first one, I think I know the answer to this already, is that have you set a target for next season? And I'm guessing staying up is the target for next season, is it?
The target is to finish as high as we can. So our target is to continue to stick together, because there will be some challenging days next season, to be resilient when those days come and just look for little improvements that we can make every week, and to finish as high in League One as we can. So that's the target.
And I've got a specific financial question for you, which is about paying back the bond. And presumably that will happen.
Yeah, so we just repaid last April, I think, 1.6 million. So I believe we have reduced our bond debt from 10.5 million to 8 million in the last 3 years. So I think as a community club, to the best of my knowledge, AFC Wimbledon has always paid its debts on time over the last 23 years. We have AC. So in terms of our equity structure, the Dons Trust has to own 75% of the equity, and it currently owns 80%. And we'll be having a conversation with its members this year about possibly reducing to 50 plus 1%. And the idea of that is that will free up the capital to repay bond debts. It will free up the capital to improve the training ground, to possibly expand the stadium a little bit. And it will hopefully give us some strategic investors who can really help us in the areas of developing players, in the areas of expanding our stadium, in the area of improving the training ground. So yeah, we always want to pay our debts, and we're quite focused on the next bond repayment, which is in 2027.
Okay.
I must say, actually, one other thing on that, Kev, is again, being a lot of the people that lent the club the money to build the stadium, and we didn't really touch on that when we were building the stadium. The fans lent the club £10.5 million, which again, you know, is just another aspect of the community nature of what we're doing. Quite a lot of those people, when we ask them, do you want to be repaid? Do you want to extend the debt, or do you want to just donate it to the club? Quite a lot of people have just donated their bond back to the club, which has been really, really helpful. So it's people's generosity and commitment behind what we're doing is just amazing at times.
Well, I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm glad to hear you say that, Mick, because at the other end of that scale, your trust, your Don's trust, is very visible in the streets of South London, raising money. You see them outside Sainsbury's in Balham every day, asking for donations for food banks, etc. So, again, it reflects very well on the club that the fans have such a visible presence on the streets of South London, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, so technically that's not the trust. That's a charity called Don's Local Action Group.
Yeah,
which was, and that was set up during COVID by a number of our fans who had just worked together to create the Plough Lane bond we just discussed. So they were heavily in activist mode. And when the pandemic started, they decided they want to help people in need. And it's just incredible. They've got hundreds of volunteers. They've donated the food to make about 7 million meals. Thousands of laptops for needy households in Merton and southwest London. And they are forever humping bits of furniture around South London, Kev. So they're forever arriving with a van and donating furniture. So they are an amazing. And I think what's really interesting about them is that, so the club also has a foundation, which is an amazing foundation. It impacts about 3,000 people a week locally, but that is the club's foundation. Don's Local Action Group was just our fans' interpretation of the values of the club. And they've used the club as a platform just to go off and do some amazing work, which is a great model for other clubs nationally to copy. So yes, so they will be there, come rain or shine, outside the local supermarket, collecting food.
You know what South London's like, Mick. There's a lot of people carrying furniture around the streets at any particular time of the day. I mean, you know that. I just want to briefly ask, because my last two questions are going to be about the values of your club and of fan-owned clubs in particular. But your women's team had a really good season too, didn't they? And I think it was your coach massively overperforming relative to competitive playing budgets.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's one of the lesser seen miracles within AFC Wimbledon that a group of volunteers led by a great guy called David Grounds have actually created the women's section and have taken a group of players who are, some of whom are just paid some expenses to have got us to the third tier of women's football. It's interesting, actually. The only other League One or Two club above us in the third tier is Exeter. So the two fan-owned clubs have really seen the importance. And I think, one of the highlights of last season for me was going to see our women play Ipswich Town, who I think were a fully professional team playing in the third tier, and actually going, sitting with the fans. And when we were planning the stadium, we wanted it to be for the entire community. I mean, you just referenced that not everybody in Wimbledon is wealthy. And when I sat in the crowd at the women's game, we had really delivered on that. Every facet of our community was represented. And as much as I'd like to say that's the same at the men's game, the reality is, the audience for men's football is much less diverse. And so I think the women's team is really important to us as a community club, because I think it's really going to help us engage with other aspects of the community. We don't, relatively speaking, we don't spend that much money on it. It is going to be a cost for some time. We're also looking for partners who see the attractiveness of women's football, so sponsors to maybe come on that journey with us. We haven't talked too much about sponsors in this conversation, but I often think of Football Manager or Championship Manager, I think it was called, calling us up on day 2 of AFC Wimbledon. I think you know the story. as saying, we want to sponsor your shirt, and giving us what was quite a significant amount of money in the Combined Counties League. They're still with us 23 years later. It's the longest running shirt sponsorship in English, certainly in English football. And if you speak to the people there, they have loved every minute of the journey. They love the values. They just love the spirit of the place. And we're actually looking for somebody to maybe partner with us on women and girls football in a similar way, who would really like the values that we've got around that, and the kind of the community outreach and what we're trying to do. So that's just something else we're doing at the moment, which is quite interesting.
I like what you did there, Mick, just casually mentioning that we hadn't talked about sponsors, but if there are anybody out there who'd want to sponsor us, then that's fine. I want to close the interview, Mick. I sometimes worry about interviews where I can't say anything critical. I sometimes think it's my duty not to just say, "Aren't you great? Aren't you?" But every now and again in an interview like this, there isn't much I can say of a negative value, apart from the fact that your fans could have been more grateful when we gave you a home back in the day. But talking about the modern AFC Wimbledon, it's very different. You pay your debts on time. Your foundation is great. Your fans are involved. Your fan owned. And the last two things I want to say, unfortunately, in a way, underline that. And first of all, I think it was Oliver Holt, a journalist, who wrote about his experience of going to Wimbledon for the first time and what a positive experience it was. But also, I'd like to end, I want to hear what you've got to say about that. But the final question comes from one of the fans again, and it sort of sums up the whole, not dilemma in a way, but it sums up what you're facing as a fan-owned club. But he says, our story is rooted in a strong identity and sense of legacy. So how do you balance respecting that cherished history with modern demands for commercial growth? Which I think is a question that goes to the heart of every football club outside the Premier League, and some of them inside it as well.
I think you're right. I mean, I often, we have lots of conversations about celebrating our history. It is, I mean, we've only touched on, the only team to win the Amateur Cup and the FA Cup. We've played more teams. If you've supported Wimbledon as long as I have, you've watched us play in 9 different divisions against hundreds and hundreds of clubs, So there is an awful lot of amazing history. But we frequently challenge each other and say, enough of the history, let's talk about the future. And, we have navigated our way to this point in time where almost beyond, if the 500 people in Wimbledon Community Centre in 2002 could have envisaged Wembley Stadium on a sunny day with 29,000 people in yellow and blue, playing in this amazing stadium in Wimbledon, it would all have been beyond their wildest dreams. And we've achieved all that. And now we just need to kind of really stick together and figure out how to move it forward from here. And one thing I would say is it's not going to be easy, but we've always found a way up until now. And we just need to carry on. We've got a brilliant kind of moral, ethical, collective community offering. One thing the move to Plough Lane has shown is that there's a real demand for that. So, we've doubled our crowd since we moved back there. Lots of people that come to Plough Lane never went to Kingsmeadow, never went to Selhurst, and never went to the original Plough Lane. They just love what we're doing. We're continually signing up new sponsors. So as much as we can, we need to stay honest to what we are and just continue to engage people around us. Our membership's gone up to 7,000. There's no reason why that can't be 20,000, because we believe that there is a demand for what we're doing. People like authentic football. People are turned off by the mass commercialization of what was their community football club. So we're trying to do things in a certain way that we believe in, and we think if we can engage more and more people to get involved with that, then we should have a bright future. So I think people are right to ask the questions. We ask them of each other every day. How the hell are we going to keep this thing going? But we will be determined to do so. We'll do our best to stick together and see what happens.
Mick, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I have to say it's been much easier to go for a pint with my Wimbledon supporting friends now that we've won the FA Cup as well, because having that thrown in my face every time I bought them a drink for the last 40 odd years has been fantastic. But it is a great story. I'm incredibly proud of being from South London, and of course we obviously want everybody else in South London to be as proud and to share in the wealth that some parts of our area has, and see that spread around the parts of our area that doesn't. But it's a great story, and my Uncle Bill was a massive Wimbledon fan. He'd be so happy to see happening to you now. So good, best of luck for next season and beyond.
Yeah, so it is a great story, and our two clubs have both really contributed to the communities of South London. So we should both be happy about that.
Yeah. Don't forget, you can now join our Price of Football Club, where you will get ad-free listening, bonus episodes, and more. Just go to priceoffootball.com and click on Join the Club to sign up today. I just missed Kieran there for a bit. I enjoy our chats post-interview, but that's why there was that slight hesitation. And if you have a question you'd like answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on X and find us on YouTube. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. Bye, everybody.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.